Okay. I've lost my glasses. Thank you. Okay, Elaine McCalley. We just met her for the first time last month. I am so excited to have her become part of my life and for this museum to become part of hers. She was the first woman in Idaho to hold a commercial pilot rating, and she is enshrined in the Idaho Aviation Hall of Fame. She began flying in Boise in 1938 at the old Boise Airport, which is the current site of Boise State University. She was an activist for women pilots, encouraging and mentoring women to get involved in aviation, which not a lot of women were in 1938. She held a number of offices in aviation organizations in Idaho as well as the Northwest. In 2013, she was presented with the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award from the FAA. So let me introduce to you now Mrs. Elaine McCalley.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And she's going to remain seated while she gives her talk. She'll keep this up to her mouth so we can all hear it, and we'll be showing a series of pictures of her history. And then she'll answer questions afterwards if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that too loud?
Okay, hold it.
Anyway, I would like to say a big thank you to Sue and all her volunteers for the wonderful work they're doing here in this museum to keep our aviation history alive. Also, I don't know whether any of you have read the Idaho magazine. I want to thank Dick Bennett for the wonderful article he wrote about me in that magazine, which really surprised me, but boy, what memories it brings back. Also, a big thank you to all of the veterans, the service people over all these years. You're really amazing, and thank you for all your service to our country. I first became interested in aviation in 1927 when I read about Lindbergh flying across the ocean to Paris, France in 1927. I saw a picture of his airplane and his Spirit of St. Louis, and I thought he was probably so brave. A few years later, I went on to California with my mother to visit my grandparents, and I heard this noise overhead. Must have been about 9 years old, and I saw that airplane, and it was pulling a great big banner behind it, advertising a grocery store. And I said to myself, I'm going to be up there one of these days. One of the drugstores in Gooding had a lot of little pamphlets and stuff talking about the pilots in World War I and their dog fights with the German fighters. And oh, they were so brave and daring, it was wonderful. And in 1934, some barnstormers landed at the airport in Gooding. In those days, airplanes were still a novelty, and many people drove out to see the airplanes and possibly take a ride. And I asked my parents if we could go out to see the airplanes. And there it was, this Pitcairn autogyro, a low-wing monoplane and a helicopter-type blades. It cost $2.50 for a ride. Well, I finally got the $2.50, climbed into that airplane, and I'll never forget the feeling of wind in my face, the roar of the engine, and seeing all the farmland and town from the air. What a wonderful feeling of freedom and excitement, and I was hooked. And after half an hour, we came back down, and I don't know, I think there isn't a pilot here that doesn't have that feeling of exhilaration and freedom for your very first flight. in an airplane. When I was old enough and got through high school and college, I joined the Gooding Flying Club in 1938. And you'll notice the name George Cook. He went on to be chief pilot for Empire Airlines then, right after the war. Well, about that time, I had taken a civil service exam for the state of Idaho and was offered a job in Boise, which I took. After I got settled, my first paycheck found me on the way out to the Boise airport for finding out about flying lessons. They were costing $7.50 an hour for dual instruction. So my first question is, when do I start? Webb's Flying Service had this J3 Piper Cub, the yellow one. Of course, it's a lot newer than the one I flew. And this was a tail dragger. At the BRC Airport at that time was between Capitol Boulevard and Broadway, where BSU is now. United Airlines had a Boeing 247 that flew in there for passenger service. Their terminal was at the Broadway entrance. And you know, these airplanes had very few instruments compared to what the new ones are. And here is the gas gauge. How about that? It was the gas gauge was a cork that floated on the gas with a metal rod that stuck up in front of the pilot. So I was introduced to other women that were flying and became a passion. Started my first 8 hours getting familiar with the airplane and learning basic maneuvers, and of course, learning handling techniques and landing. I soloed and then worked towards my 35 hours of flying before I could start my private pilot's license. And we took courses back to school in aircraft and engines, navigation, and meteorology. Remember, at this time, there were no radios in these planes, only a few instruments and tachometer and stuff. There were no lights on the runway and no control tower. In flying from one town to another, we had to plot our course on the map, taking in consideration of wind direction and speed. There were bright orange arrows along the airmail route and beacon lights that were flashing for night. Now that red arrow is on the right side of I-84 from Mountain Home to Boise. It's still being taken care of. Somebody keeps the weeds cut, and I don't know who does the paving, but they do keep this up, which is great. Shows you what we used then. The CAA inspector came to the airport after I had my 35 hours to give me my flight ensign for my private pilot license. We got through the airport just fine. Then he got out of the plane and wanted me to go back up and do my spins. So back up I went, climbed to altitude, and did my spins and came back down and landed. When I checked into the inspector and he walked up to me and he said, "You didn't do your spins." And I said, "Well, I definitely did." I don't know what he was doing, having a cup of coffee or whatever. Anyway, he climbed back in and up we went, did the spins, and came back down, and I did get my private pilot's license. My mother and dad drove up right after that from Gooding, and Mom wanted to be my first passenger. She really didn't want to go flying, but she was determined to go. So we took off, and we're going out over the countryside around Boise. She looked back at me and she said, "Can't we just go around and land?" Anyway, she was game to try, and she was so proud of herself that she could be up there with me. The flying service had bought a new Taylorcraft airplane, another tail dragger, and I continued on with my training. So I took some more courses in weather and was able to get past the written exam and everything else. So I guess it wasn't long after this that I first moved to Boise that the city of Boise realized that this little airport down there was not going to be adequate. So they had started building out at down the field. Webb's Flying Service moved their operation out there, and the rest of my flight training continued out there. We still didn't have any radios in our small planes, but a small control tower at the main terminal would flash us a green light or let us know it was okay for takeoff, or a red flag to hold. The Army Air National Guard unit had their headquarters on the far side of the field. I joined the Idaho Pilots Association, and our group put on the first air show, or a marathon, as it was called. And we decided to see what we could do. So if you could read the yellow tag, it says the price of admission was 25 cents. So we convinced a local car dealer, Eddie Dunn, to make a parachute jump, to give something else. And the Statesman newspaper really loved it. Eddie had never jumped or been up in an airplane like that at all. So the Statesman had him standing on a ladder there to get used to the altitude. Then the next picture shows he was standing up on Table Rock. So they had a great time anyway. And so it was the first air show or airathon that they did. So it was a busy time for all of us. And so they had, here's Eddie. The weather couldn't have been beautiful. It was no wind and high overcast, and he jumped right in front of it, and he was so proud of himself. And so they had other things on there. We had spot landing contest, bomb dropping from a sack of flour on a spot, paper cutting, balloon breaking, and a few things like that. So as you see, it was a far cry from the air shows of today. Okay. So anyway, here's the coverage from the Statesman of the different things that we had on the air show. A bunch of us got together one Sunday morning and flew over to Ontario for breakfast. That was always fun, taking off and doing things like that. A group of us got together and went over to Lebanon, Oregon to watch Shorty Stark set a new record for the number of parachute jumps in a single day. We also flew up to the dedication of the new Moscow Pullman Airport. We had a Women's Northwest Pilots Association and enjoyed trips to Seattle area and Spokane. And we had several meetings in Boise trying to help with the women's flying. I also joined the 99s organization that was started by Amelia Earhart. And I did have one trip to Pocatello to get another organization started. Now, in 1940, President Roosevelt must have felt that we were headed to war and started the Civilian Pilot Training Program. 10 students were selected from Boise Junior College, and one had to be a woman back then. So Webb's Flying Service hired a few more pilots and instructor pilots because of all the new students that were out there. My future husband was Val on the right there. Then one December, we had a one beautiful Sunday morning, so we rented a plane that morning and headed out to fly over Anderson Dam, which was in the process of being built at that time. Another couple rented a plane with us, and we took off, and the weather was just beautiful, although it was cold. So we flew over the South Fork of the Boise River and circled around the dam and the construction site. When we got back at Webb's Flying Service, we walked into the office, and that's what we were faced with. December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. Now, it took several days for this impact to settle in. Then flying changed. Pilots that we knew joined the Army Air Corps, and some of the women I knew even went with the ferry service. I had taken a civil service exam and was called for a job at Gowan Field as secretary to the engineering officer. We were repairing B-17 bombers to get them ready for overseas assignments. Since I was a pilot, and since a lot of the guys were going off into the service, my boss thought I should get out in the air cockpit and learn how to run up the engines of these after repaired, get them ready to go overseas. That was a big thrill, and those tech manuals were really thick. I only did this for a short time. Personnel changed in the office, and they wanted me back at the secretary. During the time I was flying, I flew a number of other planes at times, a Stearman, a Waco, a Luscombe, and a Fleet. And it was so much fun. Of course, they're all tail drivers, and the Cessnas and the other planes that hadn't arrived at the scene in Boise yet. I never did intend to ever make flying a career. It was like someone playing golf or tennis, but something I'd have to continue doing for a long time. But the war interfered, and I got married, and Val and I spent 1 year in Sikeston, Missouri, where he was teaching advanced flight training to Army cadets. We moved to Mountain Home in 1947, and I've lived there ever since. I have been so fortunate to have lived this long, to have seen all the advances made in aviation since 1930 and 40, and especially after the war. Women have taken their part so much more. They are airline pilots, instructor pilots, Air Force pilots, even one in the Thunderbird demonstration team, and even NASA. What more could we ask? I have kept up with aviation all these years, although I haven't been actively flying. My son Mike has his private pilot's license and has been narrating air shows for the last 30 years. And I've met some I've met some very wonderful people along the way, and have had a lot of opportunities in riding in the Goodyear blimp and riding with aviation legend Bob Hoover and many others. One of my treasured friends in the air show industry was the late Greg Poe, who was recently inducted into the Idaho Aviation Hall of Fame. He was a wonderful performer. While my days as an active pilot may be over, I still fly with friends whenever I can. And this is Siscobian from Mountain Home with his Bonanza, who has been wonderful to get me up in the air once in a while. Thank you, Skip. And my legacy continues. My grandson Dan is a pilot in the Army, a helicopter pilot. He has flown 2 combat tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, and I couldn't be prouder. He also has his private pilot's license, and I've been up with him several times. And my twin great-grandsons are well on their way to take their place in our aviation family. Yep, those are the hats that I think United Airlines gave them when they flew recently. And to end this, let's hit this quote. For once you've tasted flight, you'll walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward. For there you have been, and there you will long to return. Thank you very much.
That was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
98.
Okay. What can I say? This is a gift from you for our coins. So carry it for good luck in your wallet. And if anyone steals it, come back, I'll give you another one. Thank you so much. What an incredible woman. Aren't we lucky to meet her? That she came last month. Yeah. And then we met her. Thank you so much. Well, folks, I guess that's about it. Gosh, have a great Thanksgiving, by the way. I hope you enjoy your turkey day. It's the only day of the year I eat turkey, and I do love it that one time. So there's plenty of coffee. I got my donuts.